Hello everybody, and thanks for joining this webinar. I'm Andrew Campbell-Edie. I'm the Communications Manager with the Irish Centre for Diversity. I'm going to start with some self-description about myself for those that need it. I'm a black man in my 50s. My pronouns are he, him. I've shaved hair on my head and a black moustache. I'm wearing glasses with a thick black frame. Excuse the accent, I am English, but I've been in Ireland for 12 years now. And just some quick words for anyone that's joining us for the first time about the Irish Centre for Diversity. So the Irish Centre for Diversity is a company that supports businesses and organisations to become more equitable and diverse. We are the leading organisation delivering D&I training in Ireland. And so far, we've coached more than 250 companies across many sectors. Supported by IBEC, we've developed the Investors in Diversity Accreditation Mark, which is Ireland's premier performance standard. Investors in Diversity provides a structured framework to transform workplace cultures and practices so that all colleagues can thrive and share a sense of belonging. In addition to this, we offer a full consultancy service to help with any specific D&I needs. Please contact us through our website, irishcentreforddiversity.ie, or social media to find out how we can help with your diversity inclusion journey. We recently launched the first ever Diversity Inclusion Awards, which celebrates Ireland's D&I excellence across all areas. And this webinar is about giving a platform to share the learnings and experience of everyone that entered with everybody else, because everyone benefits when best practice in D&I is shared. So today's session focuses on the Matheson Outstanding Diversity Initiative Award. And we'll hear from the award sponsor, the shortlisted finalists, and the award winner. We're joined by Sarah Garvey and also Shelley, our ISL interpreters for the session. And in terms of running order, I'll shortly hand over to the award sponsor, and then we'll hear from each of the finalists and the award winner before Q&As at the end. Some housekeeping before we start. The session's being recorded and will be available on the Irish Centre for Diversity website. Everyone's muted except the panel. Please do share your comments in the chat function as we go along. We'd love to know where you're zooming in from, which company, which organisation. If you've got any comments, please do remember to just click on the little box on the side that says share with everybody, or rather than just share with the panelists. Also, please do save the Q&As, save your questions for the Q&As rather than putting them into the chat function, because otherwise they'll be missed. Okay, without further ado, I'd like to hand over to our host for today. I'm very pleased to introduce Lorraine Roche, who's HR Director with Matheson, who were our award sponsor. Over to you, Lorraine.
Thank you, Andrew, for that. As Andrew said, my name is Lorraine. I'm the HRD at Matheson. In terms of my self-description or self-describing, I'm a white female in my early 50s. I'm still able to say early 50s, with blonde hair, brown eyes, and I'm wearing a black top with a kind of black and green scarf. First of all, delighted to be invited along today to meet with the finalists of the Outstanding D&I Initiative Award, which is such an important topic, regardless of the industry, no matter where we're working. At Matheson, for those of us that know us, you'll know that we're extremely committed to embedding D&I into everything that we do, into fostering a diverse and inclusive workplace where all of our colleagues and their contributions are respected and valued. We were delighted to be the first organisation to achieve the gold standard in 2019 and to get the reaccreditation in 2022. So it's something we are extremely proud of, and our partnership with the Irish Centre for Diversity has really grown stronger and stronger as time goes on. We remain committed to continue to working hard at achieving that reaccreditation every 2 years. So hopefully we will be as successful as we have been to date. In terms of why Matheson chose to sponsor this Outstanding D&I Initiative Award, it kind of really boils down to the fact that it completely aligns with our firm's values. Our own D&I journey, which started off with a very small D&I committee in 2017, has now developed into a far more reaching, impactful business programme, which combines D&I, the arts, CSR, and environmental sustainability. So this program, it's a single vision designed to deliver and support sustainable and measurable change. So D&I forms part of that, but a very significant part of our IBP. We believe our IBP is unique in its approach, and we're therefore extremely proud to support the Outstanding D&I Award, recognising what other organisations are doing to progress their D&I in their own businesses. While Matheson was a sponsor, we were not part of the judging process or the judging panel. So I'm as excited as you all to hear more from the panel today on their submissions and their D&I initiatives. I think we'll all agree that sharing information in webinars such as this one, regardless of the industry we're working in, learning what works, perhaps what doesn't work so well, is in the interest of everyone, especially those who are in the early stages, perhaps, of navigating their D&I journey. I think it's important to say that all of the wonderful things we do in this D&I space shouldn't be about maintaining a competitive edge. Every organization and business should have D&I at the forefront of everything they do, which is why the sharing of good and bad is really, really important. So without further ado, and I think I'm still within my time, Andrew, I'd like to introduce you to our first panelist, Emer O'Donovan from FBD. Emer, before I go and discuss your submission further, perhaps you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lorraine. My name is Emer O'Donovan. I'm one of the HR business partners at FBD Insurance. And if I were to self-describe myself, I'm a white female with blonde curly hair, and I'm currently wearing a green jumper. So I've never done that before, so hopefully that's okay.
Thank you. I know it does seem a bit strange when you're not used to doing it, for sure. So listen, Emer, with regards to your submission, I understand FBD's submission was all around partnership with an external resource that I'm okay to say was Inclusio, all about gathering diversity metrics across the organisation, then to act on those metrics. So perhaps you could tell us a bit more about that journey, how you got it off the ground, because I know from experience that it's very hard to get employees to self-declare. So it'd be really helpful to see how you got that initiative off the ground.
Absolutely, yeah. So we launched our D&I strategy in at the end of sort of 2020, and the first phase of the strategy was to really assess what our current working environment looked like. We wanted to create the benchmark within FBD so that we could then further track and progress our own, further sort of track and measure our progress against where we were within the strategy. So we kind of looked for external partnerships there. We came across Inclusio, and it was this engagement tool where, in a very sort of non-intrusive way, you were able to collect D&I metrics. And it was a very anonymized way as well. But it also was a learning platform, so an educational platform to, people could engage with whatever level of degree that they were comfortable with engaging with the tool. So we rolled that out to everybody. We managed to gather a lot of different metrics around our working culture. We then, using those metrics, we developed our own internal kind of KPIs that formed part of our strategy as well. That was around trust, sentiment, inclusivity, culture, climate. So really, really important metrics that we want to achieve within the next sort of 4 years. And I suppose some of the key takeaways then, because we got so much information back from the initiative, the actions, I suppose, that we implemented after were very, very important. So they fed into our accessibility strategy, which is very much focused and delivered by our facilities department with lots of different key stakeholders around the business. So we identified that a certain population of our FBD staff identified as having a disability. So it made us have a think, okay, well, is our building accessible for everybody in the organisation? And facilities really actually kind of took ownership of this. They went out, they got an external audit done of FBD House around accessibility, and since then we've implemented the power doors, so accessible doors for people in wheelchair user, and we have a lot more work undergoing within the within head office, which will hopefully feed out to our wider branch network across Ireland, and then also our call centre that we have based in Mullingar. We've got the toilets resized as well, the disabled toilets, because our measurements were well out of date, I think 20 years out of date. But it was using the data from the Inclusio application to start that and to kind of shape that strategy, and actually to realize, okay, no, this is important, this is something we have to act on. Other sort of areas that we started to look at based off of the data that we gathered was, you know, we had a percentage of our population associated with the LGBTQ plus community. Now at FBD, which is more of a traditional company, let's say, we would never have sort of celebrated Pride before. So we had the data there to put the case forward to our management team to say, look, we have a population of people here that we should be celebrating Pride. And last year in 2022 was the first year that we really had an array of activities for Pride, flew the Pride flag outside FBD House as well, which was a big step forward for us. And then some smaller activities that came off the back of the data that we collected was around people's food preferences. You know, have we got vegetarians, vegans, any dietary requirements? And, you know, for me, that was a real kind of low-hanging fruit piece there. So we worked with the canteen that we have on site to be more inclusive in terms of our options for lunch and breakfast for people as well. We also measured how I suppose marginalization of people, so how people felt for the likes of during COVID, so that they feel isolated, that they feel part of the organization, and we scored lowly in that. So we decided, okay, what can we look at here? And this is where we started to look at different employee resource groups within FBD as well. And since we did the first check at the beginning of 2021, we have now got 3 employee resource groups up and running, one around mental health, a women's network, and then an LGBTQ plus network as well, which is really good. And we're looking to add to that more and more as we go on. And yeah,
could I just jump in there, Emer, because that's so impressive. Anything else? Did Inclusio capture stats around neurodiversity, you know, in terms of individuals who their disabilities may not be as obvious, you know? Absolutely,
yeah. And we have a percentage, I think about 7% of our population consider themselves to be neurodiverse, which it's really interesting. And it's actually a focus point now for us in the next year or so to look at how we can make our SharePoint and intranet page more diverse and neurodiverse friendly, you know. And we have one of the guys in our own team who would consider himself neurodiverse is currently looking at that as a sort of a mini project.
Okay. One of the questions I know I'm always keen to find out more about is, because, and I mentioned at the opening and the introduction about our struggles, is how do you encourage people to open up? And I know it takes a while, but what was it that you did with your partnership with Inclusio that enabled a good participation rate in terms of feeding into that?
Yeah, and we actually got a 76% participation rate, which was really, really strong.
Really good.
I was delighted with that. But it was our communication channel was very important, promoting the anonymity of the application itself. The buy-in from the senior leadership to really promote from the top down was really, really critical. And they were talking about it, you know, they created that buzz around it. And I think it was then feeding back the results and actually putting a couple of changes in place, like even something like the canteen, that people can see, okay, I've given this information and I can see what the output is back to me. And I think that's going to kind of get them on board with providing that data.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, now that sounds superb, Emer. And for the audience, there will be opportunities subject to time. Andrew will let us know if you have any questions that you'd like to explore further with Emer on that. But thank you for sharing that, Emer.
Thank you.
So our next up is Karina from KPMG. So Karina, perhaps you'd like to introduce yourself before we have a chat.
Great, Lorraine. My name is Karina Howley. I am a white female with blonde bobbed hair, and I am wearing a black jumper and a cerise pink jacket.
Super, thank you, Karina. So in terms of what my understanding of what impressed the judges with the KPMG submission, Karina, was your work around Multicultural Week, which I understand took it to a whole new level. You had engagement of over 700 employees from 53 countries. Are those figures right? Yeah, I've got that right.
That's right, yeah.
So can you tell us more about how you put this together and how it's benefiting the team?
Yeah, sure. So why Multicultural Week? We realized that the demographics within the firm had changed quite dramatically from 2020 to 2022. Our number of international employees had more than doubled. So we really, stood back from things about a year and a half ago. We set up a number of employee focus groups to understand how they were fitting into the firm. Had they any feedback, things that we could improve on, things that we did well? And from that, those employee focus groups, we asked people, listen, if you're interested, if we formed an ethnicity committee, would you be interested in supporting that? So that was kind of the genesis of where this came out of. So we looked at implementing a lot of different things, and some of them were more practical supports. But I suppose the one we submitted for the awards was about Multicultural Week. And what we wanted to do is really celebrate our international colleagues. So we done a number of activities over the course of the week last May. One was a video series where we focused on the personal story of 5 different individuals, and so every day a video story would land featuring someone from a different ethnic background and talking about their personal journey coming to Ireland, settling in, things they struggled with, things they love about the Irish culture, the firm, etc. And that really kind of opened up people's minds to, you know, the challenges people have coming to Ireland and struggling with things like Irish names, how to pronounce, Aoife and all these Irish names that can be a challenge. And the whole socializing within groups is probably new, that we do a lot of socializing probably over drinks and all that sort of stuff. So listen, people come, it really was brilliant to hear about people's cultures and what they're passionate about. We had a speaker series that we did, and we had Bundy Aki, the Irish rugby player, come and talk about his journey in terms of coming over here and settling in Ireland, and again challenges he would have faced. We had a comms that went out each day which talked about we ran competitions which focused on different continents, different countries, different days of celebration, fun facts. We had our canteen involved in terms of putting on different ethnic foods that week, and really decorating the canteen with every day. And then I suppose the big thing was we had a round the world celebration. So we held it in our car park. We're lucky enough. Stokes Place, right beside St. Stephen's Green, has a sizable car park outside, so no one was allowed to drive in that day. And we took over it and we put in a number of food trucks, different ethnic food trucks. And we really just invited people. We held it in working hours, so it was held on a Wednesday from 4 till 6. And we had over 700 people attend. And we really encouraged people from the various ethnic cultures to dress in their local dressage, and to get people talking and asking questions. And it really did promote that. It was great fun. It was everyone really got involved, and I suppose it was our first big event kind of post COVID, so we didn't know what the take up would be with people hybrid and not in the office. But we were like, this really seemed to get people out and start asking questions about people's cultures and backgrounds.
Yeah, thanks for all that, Karina. You're absolutely right. I think when people can share their own personal stories and their own personal stories, it's very, very powerful. And it's equally as powerful in terms of when Emer was talking about people, sharing their own stories about their disabilities and whatever as well. So it's a very good way to promote awareness as well. Could I ask, the initiative was followed up with an engagement survey, I believe, employee engagement survey. You had a very high completion rate on that as well. From what I understand, the survey was really positive around employees feeling that they were respected and valued in terms of their voice and being able to, have that kind of psychological safety net around them. Was there anything else that came out of the survey on that?
Yeah, well, we specifically targeted our non-Irish employees or international employees, and I mean, 87% would recommend KPMG is a great place to work. A high percentage, 75%, believed everyone has an equal opportunity to progress. Over 80% felt that their team values and respects their voice. There was a great sense of belonging in terms of the firm, and a huge number of them, because one of the questions we asked, would you be open to being a buddy for a new joiner? And I suppose we do have a buddy program in place for any new joiner coming into the firm, where, you know, they'll show you the ropes and you know, do all the basic stuff. But I suppose we felt that a buddy program would be great if you had an international employee buddied up with another international employee. It doesn't have to be from the same function, but helping them settle into the country. You really don't realize the kind of barriers that are there. Even things that simple things that I suppose we take you know, for granted, is coming to Ireland, you know, getting your PPS number, getting your bank set up, all those sort of tasks that can be really challenging, finding places to live, you know, whereas the best schools, all those sort of things need to be taken into consideration. And we do have a mobility organization that helps us with people joining, but it's when it goes beyond the month and someone is set up, what are the other supports that they need?
Karina, thank you so much for sharing that. And I've got a couple more questions. Maybe for time at the end, I'll come back to you on it, if that's okay. So with regards to then, our next up is Marcelina and Rory. So before we carry on the discussion, perhaps Marcelina and Rory, you'd like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks very much, Lorraine. So my name is Marcelina Fogarty, and I'm the Strategic Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Manager in UCD. So I'm a white female with another blonde person, blonde curly hair, and I go by the pronouns are she and her.
That's super. Thank you, Marcelina. And do we have Rory
yes,
with us?
Hi, Lorraine.
Hi, Rory.
Very nice to see you, and thanks for hosting this. My name is Rory Carey, and I'm the Director of Culture and Engagement in UCD. I would self-describe myself as follically challenged. In other words, I have a lack of hair. I have just hit 50. I'm wearing a grey shirt, and the sun is shining in the window here, and my pronouns are him and her, him and he. So that's ourselves. We're just going to do a double act, so it's going to be quite brief, I suppose, Lorraine. So we'll hand back to you to find out what questions you have.
That's perfect. Thank you, Rory, and thank you, Marcelina, and welcome to the 50s Club, Rory. It's not actually that bad, I have to say. With regards to UCD submission, I understand there was comprehensive research undertaken on dignity and respect, and the initiative that followed to counteract bullying and harassment and sexual misconduct, which is obviously such an important topic. And can you talk to me about how you started off on this? So obviously more about the research and the process that UCD applied in relation to carrying out the review in the first place, I guess.
Yeah, okay, Lorraine, I'll take this aspect, and I think Marcelina will kind of follow up on maybe some of the impacts and the implementation. So really, there were two parts really to the work that we did, and as you said, the first part was there was quite a lot of research. It was a review of all of our dignity and respect practices and our policies, and fundamentally, it's about enhancing a culture of respect at the university. In terms of the scale of it, the review and the research would have applied to all of our staff and students. So it's kind of unique in that it's not just focused on staff. The population that would have been impacted by the work we're doing is around 45,000 people. So just in terms of the review itself, we would have done research around best practice policies elsewhere. We would also have looked at, I suppose, in terms of the sort of expert groups out there that helped advise us in terms of what best practice is as well. The reason we were looking at this as well is that I suppose research has indicated that those coming from the protected grounds under equality legislation are more vulnerable to situations of bullying, harassment, or sexual misconduct. So from our point of view, and I suppose it's aligned with what you said at the start there, Lorraine, it's essential that we have an environment where everybody can work and study in a rewarding and safe and stress-free way. So that was kind of our vision and has remained our vision around what we've been doing. The research itself then led to, in terms of the review itself, we produced two new policies, a bullying and harassment policy, and then separately a sexual misconduct policy. The sexual misconduct policy is the first of its kind in our sector, in that it's much broader than just a standard sexual harassment policy. And alongside the two policies, we developed detailed procedures to assist informal and formal resolution where issues arise, and support documentation is provided then as well to people that are reporting incidents, and also those that are reported. So in essence, really, the policies themselves and all that work it was only really one element of the work that we did, and we found that alongside the policies we needed to develop a broader framework. So we developed over 100 recommendations alongside the policies, which then needed to be implemented to enhance our culture, a positive culture around dignity and respect at the university. So look, I'll pause there, Lorraine, and potentially you can hand over around the implementation of all of those recommendations to Marcelina.
Thanks, Rory. Before I go to Marcelina, could I just ask, you mentioned on your sexual misconduct was much broader than sexual harassment, which is the normal term we refer to. Can you give us an example of how broad that is, or what's incorporated to make it broader beyond the sexual harassment itself?
Yeah, well, I mean,
misconduct.
So we have a new definition around sexual misconduct. So it is broader than harassment itself.
Yeah,
sexual harassment. I mean, I suppose there's a whole range of, I suppose, of issues that can be undertaken under that, and as well as that, it's where these issues are reported. So it doesn't necessarily have to be directly 9 to 5 in the workplace or in the classroom. You know, so for example, it can happen off campus if it's related to an organizational event, for example, as well. So you know, in terms of, like, it's all published on our website. It's very open access for people to look at, I guess, where we went to around this in terms of definitions, etc.
Great. No, that's so interesting. And I read an article just quite recently on the whole issue of banter and how easy banter can go wrong. And that is a huge issue for many employers, because you want an environment where people can feel comfortable and have a bit of a laugh and be themselves at work. But it's so easy for that banter to go over the line, and then one person's banter becomes another person's harassment. So
it's interesting you even use that terminology, and Marcelina will maybe touch on it in a second, but as part of our communications campaign, we have used the word banter. You know, it's not banter, it's bullying. Would be one of our strap lines as part of our comms campaign.
That sounds great. Thank you for sharing that, Rory. Appreciate that. So Marcelina, over to you on the implementation.
Okay, great. So a very brief overview. The implementation took well over a year, and we're still, you know, it's a journey, as we say, and our policies and all of that are always evolving. And, you know, we've even looked at our policies a year and a half later, and we can see that some changes need to be made again. So this is a constantly moving parts, I suppose, to ensure that we are you know, keeping up with best practice and leading the way in the sector, really, we would say, you know. So in terms of implementation then, and the structure we took, as Rory said, there was over 100 recommendations in the report from the review. So we distilled all of those kind of themes that are emerging into 6 work streams. So our first work stream was around the establishment of a dignity and respect oversight group. And this group, of broad representation from across the university, includes employees and students, but also included you know, groups that, as Rory had mentioned, there are some groups that might be more vulnerable to experiencing issues of bullying, harassment, or sexual misconduct. So it's very important that their voices were on this oversight group. And we also had external representation on the group, which is a theme throughout our research when we were carrying out the review, as well as then implementation. So this group is important in terms of enhancing transparency. It's a university level group. It is oversight of the implementation of our policies and that broader supporting framework. I mentioned external involvement there, so we were very keen to ensure external involvement continued right throughout the entire dignity and respect process. So we use external mediators, external investigators for formal complaints. We've an external member on our screening panel process, which is a panel that reviews complaints when they come in to ensure that they do fall under the definitions of bullying, harassment and sexual misconduct. We have external training providers. So all of that external involvement provides great expertise, but also gives that objectivity and kind of instills greater confidence of our employees and students in our processes. Training, then we took a 3-tier training approach. So we have in-depth training for key contact roles. So these are roles that people would be most likely to approach if they are experiencing issues of bullying, harassment, or sexual misconduct. So they got quite in-depth training in the area of bullying, harassment, and sexual misconduct. Then people managers, of course, are a really important group because people managers have a responsibility. There is an onus on them to help to resolve issues as early as possible. You know, early resolutions, what we'd be trying to aim for. So we launched last June, and we're still carrying it out, face-to-face disclosure training for people managers so that they feel equipped and confident to be able to support those impacted by bullying, harassment, and sexual misconduct. And we're talking about up on 700 people managers in UCD, so that's why it's taking over the course of a year. And then finally, in terms of a training, we've online training for all our employees and students, and that includes bystander training as well. And so as Rory had mentioned, you know, you're talking about a population of 40,000, you know, going through that online training. So again, that's just providing a basic level of understanding of what bullying, harassment, and sexual misconduct is, where you can go to seek supports if you're experiencing these issues, and what your options are for resolution. Roy just mentioned the awareness raising campaign there as well. So again, there's an all over campus campaign with a lot of banners and visual posters and all of that with key messages. But the key message being we don't tolerate bullying, harassment, or sexual misconduct. And we also have kind of codes on that, on those posters linking back to the training to try and encourage uptake of the training. But this is an ongoing process, as I was saying, a journey. So the messages on the posters are going to change over time, and they won't stay the same thing all the time because it'll depend on what our data is telling us. So if our data is telling us that there's a lot of sexual harassment or sexual violence, particularly among students, that be prevalent, then our campaign will focus in on that. Or, you know, there might be harassment on the grounds of, you know, maybe race or LGBTI, etc. So our messages on those posters will change over a period of time, depending on what the data tells us. Our flagship initiative then really was the establishment of a dignity and respect support service, which is again the first in the sector, anyway, the higher education sector. And so there are 3 full-time employees. So they're kind of dignity and respect support advisors within that support service, and they're there to support those who might be experiencing bullying, harassment, or sexual misconduct, but also those who might be reported. So their supports are providing support in a non-judgmental way, providing guidance, all of that. So again, that's in addition to like all the training. Training will only do so much, but really if you're experiencing an issue, to have somebody to go and talk to is really important. And then finally, we looked at developing data systems to enhance data collection, because the data is so important in terms of, as I said, being able to feed into communications campaigns, being able to measure the impact of all of our initiatives. Are we doing the right things? Is it having the desired effect? So that's capturing data on people who approach seeking for support, formal complaints data, and we also have a dedicated section in our quality, diversity and inclusion survey on dignity and respect, so capturing the more, I suppose, qualitative type data as well about how they think that the university is doing around dignity and respect. And just briefly, Rory mentioned impact there as well. So we are getting very positive feedback from our training sessions. We do a pre and post evaluation, particularly for the people manager training, and you can see the difference in the confidence levels following the training. So that's really positive. There's also been an increase in people coming forward, people reporting incidents, people making formal complaints. And I know it's strange in that you'd say, well, how could that be a positive? But actually, we know that the level of reporting is it's far too low for the size of the institution. So an increase in the short to medium term is actually a positive thing, because people are now feeling confident in our processes, and that something will be done, and they feel safe and coming forward. But over time, in the long term, we would hope that that would begin to go down again as our culture changes, and actually these behaviours aren't.
That shows great engagement. Sorry, that shows great engagement. Sorry to interrupt, but we do need to move on.
I'm just done. Yeah.
Just aware of time. Sorry. But it's great that engagement's there. Back to you, Lorraine, if you wanted to
sure.
Thank
you, Marcelina. And if it means anything, I ran over at my last session with Andrew, and I was cut short too. So I know what it's like. There's so much good stuff to talk about. But that sounds tremendous, that project. And I think that the important aspect is not just those who are victims of it, but those who witness it. It's as important that they come forward too. So thank you for sharing that, Marcina and Rory. So our next panelist I'm going to move to is Jill from CORE. Jill, you might like just to introduce yourself to the audience.
Hi everyone, I'm Jill Downey. I'm the Chief Sustainability and Sponsorship Officer in CORE. So my day job is a sponsorship expert, but I also look after everything ESG related in CORE now. That remit started with D&I and expanded into sustainability in a wider context as well. I am a white female. My pronouns are she, her. I'm wearing a black and green dress. I've got long brown with some dyed blonde hair, and I am much shorter in real life than I look on a screen. That's me.
Thank you for that, Jill. So I believe CORE's submission, I know it was highly commended in this category of outstanding D&I initiative. And I understand what stood out for the judges here was the CORE's marketing framework, which has a very strong D&I focus and great potential to impact more broadly than just internally. So you might just tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. And thank you for having me, by the way, guys. It's been, we were delighted, obviously, to get highly commended on the night. Yeah, it's really interesting hearing some of the other initiatives, because I think this award categories must be really hard to judge because initiatives are all so different. And I've learned loads already, by the way, from everybody, stealing a lot of the ideas, which I think is the
writing
best thing.
furiously.
Yeah, about diversity and inclusion events and awards is the learning and the fact that, you know, everyone wants to share what they're doing, which is great. Our framework that we've devised, I suppose it came from a place where, look, advertising is what we do for a living, and advertising is very powerful. And most people don't want to admit it, but they are highly influenced by advertising, more so than they might realize. And so with that kind of power, I suppose, it comes great responsibility, as the phrase goes. And CORE evolved from a media planning and buying agency where we would place the adverts, and we've evolved into making the adverts. And I suppose we just didn't want to be an agency that made ads that didn't have diversity and inclusion in mind. So in order to do that, we created a D&I framework. Now there's an awful lot to that framework, and that wouldn't, like, it is a joy to take people through it, but a lot of stuff went into it, a lot of reviewing best practice across the globe. But really what we wanted to do is make sure that diversity and inclusion is thought of at all stages of the journey of making an ad, particularly an ad that's seen on TV or on a big broadcast medium. But it applies to all types of advertising. And I suppose really another kind of crucial factor there is the fact that advertising itself has a diversity problem. You know, that's impacting on the biases that people bring into the creative decision-making process. So as an industry, we're very young. I'm not, I was about to say my age earlier, so I'm in my mid-40s, but it's a very young person's industry. Only 5% of our industry, as in practitioners in advertising, are over 50, which is staggering. And it was a very young industry. It sort of evolved from a lot of unpaid internships, which meant in order to even be able to survive a job in Dublin, you had to be able to put yourself up, or your family put you up. So it's quite a middle class, and it's very much dominated by men in the creative side of the industry at the top. So all of there's a very lack of gender balance in creative talent, and so all of those things were kind of feeding into where we were going. So we created a framework. It has three kind of key parts. The first part is a crew planner, so it's about deciding who should work on a particular brief, and it's just a really great way of it's an easy to use tool to see all of the different roles that people will play and who should be on the team, and it's a great chance to say, depending on the brief, should we add more diversity to this crew that are working on coming up with the ideation and execution of an ad. There is then what we call the 3 Ps, which is about the storytelling in the ad. So that's presence, personality, and perspective. So it's all about who's in the ad, what role are they playing, and whose perspective are you seeing the ad from? And again, it just adds some depth to the way you're telling the story. And you know, advertising has grown up being kind of quite stereotypical, actually, if you think about it, because it's supposed to be representing, you know, a sort of a cohort of a population, but that has obviously fed stereotypes as well. And obviously we don't want to be a company that does that. And we always kind of talk about the fact that, you know, if you're going to want to help solve, you know, some of the big challenges that exist from an ESG perspective, you have to think about what the unique talents your organization has and the role they can play. And ours is obviously telling better stories, telling more balanced stories, and bringing diversity right through everything we do. So the third aspect then of our framework, which is probably the one that most people talk about a lot internally, or try and get them to think about the entire framework, but it's a scorecard. And that's a real, it's a post-evaluation tool really, but it's being used more and more at storyboard time and script writing time to see how you would score the ad based on representation within the ad. And it's actually helping change clients' minds before they sign off on the cast in an ad and things like that. So it's been very interesting process. And that scorecard, we've scored all of our creative output in 2020. We had a disappointing score that we weren't happy with. We scored all our output in 2021 and we'd seen great improvement, and we scored all our output in 2022 and we're seeing continuous improvement in the representation in the advertising that we're putting out into the market that people are consuming. And then one final aspect of what the scorecard itself has also helped facilitate is we've done a study on Irish advertising in the last 10 years. It hasn't been published yet, and it's very much I don't think it would stand up to UCD standards of studies now. It's a look at the top advertising over 3 years within 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and last year. And what we did was we have systems and tools to tell us how many ratings, so TV ratings went behind those ads. So they're the most consumed ads in the country in those years. So we took the top 25 in each year and we ran them through our scorecard to see how diverse they were. And the results have been really interesting in that. So it's actually, the framework was supposed to help us do have better representation in advertising, but is actually also going to be useful for the industry to understand how far along we've come. And I think instinctively most people would recognize that advertising has become more diverse, and there's been a conscious step change in the use of people of color in particular in advertising, and the roles and gender stereotyping in advertising has changed quite significantly. And we saw a 63% uplift in representation between 2011 and 2016, and a further 18% uplift between 2016 and 2021. Now, I had hoped that uplift would be bigger for the more recent years, but it is overall, it's a 93% uplift in representation. So the two key areas that have changed the most were gender and use of people of colour. However, within that, there were some challenges. We have quite a decent Asian population in Ireland, and they don't feature in advertising at all, or very little. We have there is a slight bias showing and preference for skin tone within people of colour, and then there's very little to say on improvements around people with disabilities, and age is actually another area.
I was going to actually say that, you know, there's a lot of progress been made, as you mentioned, and there is one particular brand, which I won't mention, but their advertising campaign is very good because it's now broadening between gender, age, and skin color, as you put it as well. And that's great to see. And it's actually been very, very successful. So I think breaking through the stereotype, typical kind of attitudes is difficult, but like you can definitely see progress being made for sure. Sorry, Jill, was there anything else you wanted? I think we might have 1 minute left. Andrew, do we with Jill? Are we okay for 1 minute? Yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to mention with this 1 minute?
Well, I was just going to say, while frameworks are, it's been very useful, and it's changed. We don't even need to use the framework now for people to adopt a diversity and inclusion lens to what they're making. But we still have challenge convincing clients sometimes to move along with us. And so, yeah, it is great to see that there has been change. But I don't think the pace of change is acceptable from the industry or from the wider marketing community either. So I think the other place where there's no visible representation either, and this is a little bit difficult because the visibility of diversity isn't always as easy to interpret, but there's no use of members of the traveling community in advertising typically, and given their history and importance to our overall culture, I think it's a problem that should be addressed as well. So the framework can't do everything, but at least it's helping us kind of go in the right direction, which is really positive.
That's super, Jill. Thank you for sharing all of that. It's really good stuff. And I know we haven't even touched on the parenting supports that so I'd love to touch to you separately about that too, because I'm very interested to hear what you're doing in that space. But thank you for that.
Anytime. Yeah.
So, right, our last guest is Linda Allen. So, Linda, before I introduce you as, well, I might as well say now you're the winner of the Outstanding Initiative Award, D&I Initiative Award. So, congratulations on that. So, before we chat more about how you became the winner and what it was that enabled you to get that award, you might just like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. I'm Linda Allen. I'm the Senior Manager for Talent and Diversity with Bus Éireann. I'm a white female. I just turned 50, so there is a pattern here, I think. This is the type of work we're all drawn to when we hit a certain point in our lives. I don't know. I'm told I look younger than 50, so if you could picture a young 50, that'd be great. I'm in a blue dress with lots of colour, which probably is symbolic of me. I am a colourful person, and I have brown hair in a bob with a few blonde highlights. And my pronouns are she and her. So yeah.
Super. Thank you for that, Linda. So as I said, congratulations again. And for the benefit of the audience, I might just quickly run through a few of the highlights of your submission and then go into a bit more detail on specific aspects of that. So your approach to, I know that the judges were very impressed with Bus Éireann's approach to inclusive hiring practices, leveraging the underutilized talent channels and the apprenticeship pathway, which is something I really want to hear more about. Bus Éireann's recruitment target actively targets women, socioeconomic challenge groups, and those with accessibility needs, which is great, and that also in turn then helps to broaden the scope of access to the transport industry. And finally, I believe that during the interview process, the judges felt that you truly demonstrated your passion and commitment, which was brought to life in the written submission. So congrats on delivering that so well too. So I guess where do we start? It's all pretty impressive stuff, Linda. It's something we're seeing more and more organizations invest in. But Bus Éireann's journey certainly takes it to a different level, and it gives us all a very high bar to get to. But I guess, could you try and summarize what actions were taken to, first of all, get this initiative off the ground, and the approach that was taken, and if Bus Éireann partnered with anyone to help with that journey?
Sure. Well, as you mentioned, women are underrepresented in transport, and it is a target, obviously, at Bus Éireann and our other companies in the CIE group to increase representation of women, but also in the areas of apprenticeships, and then as a pipeline to other engineering roles or other trade roles. We were finding women were underrepresented, and in fact, they were underrepresented across Ireland. So what we wanted to do was to widen access. We began to collaborate. So we started to work in partnership with TU Dublin's College of Engineering and Built Environment. They were running what was called an Access to Apprenticeship program. So they would target young people from disadvantaged backgrounds, and they would put them through a 12-week program, to give them exposure to lots of different trades. And then Bus Éireann would go in and meet the students, have a speed dating event, do open days with the students. showcase different trades, you know, to give them opportunities that maybe they didn't necessarily feel that they had. But what we found there was that there was a lot of minority groups actually in these access to apprenticeship programs, particularly women. We started to see there was a lot more female representation, so we could start to attract more women, you know, through these programs. So we were involved with the Women in Apprenticeship. There was a Women in Trade Network Ireland, and then a Women Building the Future networking, again, which was all about supporting female apprentices and students, you know, to develop their own network of female colleagues and to share their experiences in informal and relaxed environment. So our apprentice program manager is David Poynton, and he travels the length and breadth of the country. You know, he goes to lots of schools, to DEIS schools, to Plunkett College there over in Finglas, to different education training boards around Ireland, and basically, you know, tries to showcase the bus éireann apprenticeship. We got the Business in the Community mark as well, and we participate in their World of Work program, which is where a company partners with a DEIS school and actually supports them through mentoring and then through showcasing different career options. So I suppose from my perspective, because talent and diversity is brought together for me, I'm seeing diversity as a pipeline for talent for the future. And as we're all competing, you know, more and more in the market, for me, this is a, you know, it's a real source of talent if we can start to tap in. And, you know, for us in Bus Éireann, diversity management is more than the 9 grounds. And this gives you an opportunity to look at people from disadvantaged backgrounds who maybe don't always get the same opportunities. Like I myself am from Finglas, I'm from the north side. And in early, when I left school, I was getting through a lot of aptitude tests, but I wasn't getting through on the interviews, and I was getting a lot of rejections until I was hired by the CIE group. So I do understand sometimes where opportunities can be limited, but when you get those exposures and you build those relationships with companies, you know, it really is a great way to attract talent. So our apprenticeship program, we call it a career built around you. And our idea really is, and particularly this year, we're really focusing on it, is we're not alienating candidates based on their experiences or educational backgrounds. So a lot of apprenticeship programs, you will see they require a leaving cert or they require certain levels in the junior cert. We have totally eliminated that now. We have gone for the SOLAS equivalency, which is the minimum requirement for anybody coming in for an apprenticeship, because, you know, by its nature, not everybody will have gone to a school in Ireland maybe, or they may be new into the country. So the junior cert and the leaving cert, you know, may be a barrier to other groupings. So very much for us, it's about finding the people who are the right fit overall and then want to come on this journey with us, this net zero journey in Bus Éireann. So our messaging very much this year is you don't need to meet 100% of the standard criteria of other companies, but we build a career around you as the candidate, you know, who's willing to learn and grow. So that's very much the focus of our campaign this year, to really broaden access to so many groups and to you know, offer an apprenticeship that's for the right person. Yeah, so
that sounds fantastic,
yeah.
Linda.
Yeah.
It really does. And you know, definitely, as I say, it's going to sound cringy, award winning, but thank you for sharing that, and thank you to all of the panelists for sharing their revision on their submissions. So Andrew, I'm still within my time. I'm not going to get in trouble this time.
You are
around,
within
so
your time. Yeah,
I'll hand over to you. I'll hand over to you.
Okay. Right. Well, thank you everybody for those contributions. Are amazing. So do we have time for the Q&As now? So I'm just going to open up the Q&A function. And I'm sure there are plenty of questions that were posed in the chat function. If someone could transfer them, if you could retype them into the Q&A section, that would be great. But to get us going, there's a question for Karina here, which is from an anonymous attendee. They're asking, was it difficult to give their own personal narrative on the, I think you were doing some employee surveys and things like that. So Karina, hopefully that question mean something to you?
I'm assuming it might be for the video series that we dropped,
Sorry.
because the survey would have been anonymous unless people wanted to give their details. So no, I suppose we were lucky that the people we reached out to in our focus groups were very positive. I had thought there would be more negatives. Everyone felt that the Irish were very welcoming, and there was a lot of positives. So then when we asked people if they were interested in following up and being committed to a committee or and it was those people we targeted then, because obviously we had those personal connections with those people, so they were happy to share their story and their personal experience on video, which they sit on our website for anyone to have a look at if you're interested.
And I suppose that question could be applied to anyone on the panel, really, because it's, you know, what we've found through all the work with the awards, and so certainly the other webinars that we've done, is that whole sharing of personal journeys and personal perspectives is so valuable in D&I work. And I wondered if some of you could share what happens internally, or how those conversations are enabled internally. You know, I suppose it would be creating a culture. What do you do to create a culture where people will want to volunteer their stories, their perspectives, and in terms of data, their personal information for surveys and things like that, and then open that to everybody?
Hi, Andrew. I don't mind speaking here.
Thanks, Emma.
We have hosted a number of panel discussions internally with our staff to celebrate Women's Day, Men's Day, Pride. We kicked this off, and for example, I'll use the Women's Day last year, and we're currently planning for this year's one, but we had some of our senior management come together and talk through their own biases that they've experienced throughout their working career. So we've had some of our executive management team mixed in with people from all different levels within the business, talking openly about struggles that they faced maybe coming back from maternity leave, how maybe that has impacted in them advancing in their career. And I think that started the ball rolling with sort of promoting a really safe environment to have these conversations, you know, whether it's with an individual and their manager directly, or whether it's in a wider community with your colleagues, with your peers. But I think it's that openness and willingness to discuss these topics from the top down again, I think really opened that door for us anyway.
And that leads perfectly into the next question, which is, which I'm going to, again, open to everybody. Have you faced any challenges with getting leaders to take accountability for embedding the E&I in the business practices, and how have you navigated them? So again, it's that inclusive leadership piece and getting buy-in from the senior team. Lynn?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. Yeah. So we're working with the Irish Centre for Diversity, and you know that has worked out really well. So we've put a number of leaders and managers through the inclusive leadership program, and we've set up a steering group and a working group, and we just had a strategy workshop with our senior leaders where they're starting to shape, I suppose, their vision for DE&I, and that's so important. I think Fiona, one of the facilitators, commented she'd never seen so many senior managers on a strategy group, which was brilliant to see that, you know, the whole senior leadership team actually invested in the morning, and a number of them are on the steering committee and will champion the work. So for me, it was very much about getting them to shape the strategy, shape the agenda, and then putting the right structure and the right investment in this work in place. So that's kind of how I've approached it. Yeah.
Congratulations on that.
Yeah.
I think, Lorraine, I know you've done amazing work with your impactful business program. So, you know, DE&I is kind of embedded completely within Matheson already, and everyone that kind of onboards into Matheson totally has to buy into that, and I'm sure they do it willingly. And I'm sure that it's similar with KPMG as well, Karina. But is there anything you wanted to add in terms of how do you get buy-in from senior leadership, and you know if you can talk about how important it is, maybe?
Sure. Will I talk to that first, Karina? So I guess
Sure.
it was mentioned earlier on in the discussion as well that it's vital to have support from the very top. Without support at senior leadership level, it's not going to work. But you know, promoting awareness around the benefits to be derived from it, it's not just the right thing to do. There's significant business benefits associated with it in terms of having diverse talent, and I'm sure the Irish University have various surveys that they could pull out now to identify how much more productive workforces are when they're diverse, and that drives then the bottom line. So there's numerous things. So we promote the reasons why. The important thing also is, I guess, is not to get complacent. So while you're making progress, it's much harder to continue making progress than say, and that's why I think that's where the challenges lie. That's where I think maybe where some organizations might fail is that they reach a level and they think great, and maybe workloads, other things take over, but the promotion of the benefits and everything else slows down, and that then impacts the progress that's made within the D&I sphere. So I think it's important not to get complacent and to re-energize employee resource groups. So for example, we'd have various committees under Impact of Business Programme, and they're rotated on and off to make sure everyone has an opportunity to input and fresh thought as well. So not saying that everyone gets stale, but it's just good to re-energize those groups, which in turn feeds into the D&I strategy.
Yeah, and I might
Thanks, Lorraine.
just concur with what Lorraine said there. I mean, you do need the tone set from the top, I think is imperative. What we did a big strategy review a couple of years ago, and from that, where we looked at every element, every which way, conducted focus groups throughout our firm, and it was mixed from partners down to employees. And I suppose from that then we got commitment. So 2 partners from each of our functions were put on a steerco, an IDE steerco, and that has really put a huge emphasis on, you know, each business unit, what they're doing, having that tone from the top, then pushing it within their own function. And the other thing we do is accountability, especially in terms of the gender space. We really we did a whole after gender pay gap reporting. And it's something we've been very conscious over the last number of years, and ran our own internal report so that we knew where we were ever before the legislation came into effect. But that we, you know, each business function would get a set of data where it would look at their recruitment numbers. So what we do from a grad recruitment, experienced recruitment, people we put in our leadership programs, what is the performance of our people, what's the attrition rates. So we look at every element of our people, within a business unit. And so people can see, oh, I'm doing well on grad recruitment, I'm at 50-50 females, but actually on experienced hires, it's actually lower for X, Y, and Z reason. We need, and to create that awareness of where there's gaps, and so that they can then put in place elements to fix them, and that they make commitments. Well, we will commit to having, 50-50 experienced hires by X date. And it really gives them ownership for what they're going to do, but it really does hold them to account. And each of those heads of function have to present their numbers twice a year at the leadership team. So it really, and I think accountability is key.
It's a great account. That's fantastic. And again, that wonderful word data comes into it again, the importance of measuring kind of where you're starting, and as opposed to you want to get to, that paints the picture perfectly. Moving on then, Linda, there's a question here for you, which is from an anonymous attendee. It asks, what was it about the Career Built Around You initiative that was so important? And that's a very open question, and you can answer that in whichever way you like.
Yeah, it just meant a lot to me, that theme, or the essence of that it wasn't a big checklist, that organizations often put out, that you must meet X, Y, and Z criterion, because I think you can often lose some really good candidates. And by the way, I have done it over the years where I've done a job analysis, and maybe, we've had these quite stringent criterion, which has excluded people. So the Career Built Around You it's less about bus errands, checklist and more about, you know, what you're going to bring to the table. Now, don't get me wrong, we still obviously have to have a selection process around it, but we're just trying to remove maybe some of those barriers that normally people get cut out at the very early stages. So if we could just see that talent come through. So that was the kind of philosophy around it. Like, it was more about you than about me, if you know what I mean, as in it was more about the person than about Bus Éireann's list of requirements. Yeah, so I hope that's, because if you think of an apprenticeship, it is a learning piece in a way. Like, while there is a curriculum, it's so important that the apprentice gets what they need from the program, and the learning is tailored and so on. So if we have lots of diversity, not one size fits all in terms of an apprenticeship program. So our apprentice program manager is currently working with Sulis, actually shaping the curriculum, because obviously we have the electric vehicles and lots of changes happening in the mechanic trade. So yeah. Right. So I like just that idea that we start to tailor it around the person and not just a program as well.
Yeah. Total people-focused approach there.
Yeah,
that's wonderful.
That's it, Andrew. Yeah.
I'm going to bring it to a close because we're ahead of time, but we've answered all the questions, and I'm aware that, you know, we're coming up to lunchtime. All of our times are precious. So I'm going to close by saying a huge thank you to all of our panelists and to Lorraine, our host. Thank you very much for everything that you've shared. Thank you for all the learnings that you've given everybody, myself included. Just remind everybody that the recording is available on the Irish Centre for Diversity website, or will be in a few days' time. Contact us through the website if you've got any questions that we can help with. And also, please do register for our other webinars that are taking place over the next few weeks. That's it. Wrap up. Thank you very much again. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.